you want to start your dough recipe with your 2 cups of hot water. Now this is tap water, but it's hot as you can get it. Put your 2 cups of hot water in your stand mixer, and you're going to add immediately 1 tablespoon of sugar and 1 tablespoon of salt. I prefer kosher. Maybe it's just an Alton Brown thing. Add the sugar and the salt. Now there's a lot of people who say salt will kill yeast if you do this method in this direction. I've never had that problem, and my pizza dough turns out great. So I'm going to keep doing it that way, and I suggest you do the same. So you're going to add 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. 2 teaspoons does it, but 2 1/4 teaspoons is what a standard envelope will be in those little bread machine envelopes or the individual use packets. That's how much that's going to be. You want to let this stand for at least 5 minutes, and it's going to bloom. You're going to see all the yeast sprinkled on the surface of the water puff up and get kind of bubbly. So there, hopefully you can see kind of what it's doing. Not all of it has to bloom, but you just want some action. You want to see that the yeast is starting to grow and to eat. That tells you that it's doing what it should and that it's going to actually start to raise your bread. Now, we're going to add 2 cups of the flour. That's it. We've reserved a total of 5 cups. So I'm going to measure out 2 cups and put that into the mixing bowl. This works in stages. We're going to start 2, mix for a little while, and then add the rest of them at later stages. But right now, with the 2 cups of flour added to our liquids, we're going to put a dough hook on the mixer. It's got to be a stand mixer. If you don't have a stand mixer with a dough hook, this doesn't work. You can't do it with a beater or anything else, so don't try. But put your dough hook on your stand mixer. Beat that until it combines. So I'm going to get a spatula, scrape down the edges as I'm going, because it's not very full yet, so the dough hook isn't going to draw everything into the liquid yet. So if I keep pushing that in until it's combined, I just want all of the flour combined into the liquid. And this is going to be very runny. It's going to be like a very wet pancake batter at this point, but that's what you want. The idea here is that while we let this sit for 20 minutes, that's going to be our next step, that the flour is going to expand and release some of the gluten that's locked up in those little pieces of ground up flour. That's going to help us obtain the chewiness that we want in this crust. It's really hard to get that without doing this. So mix it as hard or as soft as you want. Just get it combined. Get all the lumps out of it and get it to a nice pancake type batter consistency. Once you have that done, take a look at it. See, it's pretty wet still. You're going to let this sit for 20 minutes. So I set a timer and walk away and just wait. It's going to start to rise. You're going to see this puff up about a 1/3 inch size as that mixture rises. That's good. That tells you your yeast is working and that it's got something to work on. It's starting to devour the sugars that it can find, both the sugar you added and the sugar in the flour. So that's good. Then we're going to go ahead and add 2 more cups of flour. This is going to put us at a total of 4 cups at this point. This is the minimum amount it's going to take to do this recipe. Where I live in Colorado, it's pretty dry. In the middle of winter, when it's very dry, sometimes that's the end of it. We're done at 4 cups. It's been raining a lot lately. The humidity is pretty high, so we're going to keep adding. That's the thing about baking. If you're not used to baking, you need to understand that the actual moisture content of your dough is dependent not only on what you add to it, but on the moisture in the air. So if your humidity level is real high, if you live somewhere along the coast, or if you just got high humidity at the moment, you're going to have to add less water, more flour, one way or the other to get the consistency you want. Today, I'm adding quite a bit of flour. I'm going to go almost a full 5 cups. So at this point, I'm going to just keep adding this 5th cup. So I measured out my 5th cup, and I'm going to keep putting in just a little bit at a time. Add a little bit, mix, add a little bit, mix, add a little bit, mix, until I've added enough to get the dough to come together. Now I don't want it to come together hard. I don't want a big tough ball. I want it pretty soft and pretty sticky to where it still takes a lot of flour to work this with your fingers. It actually looks, people say, it should look like a baby's bottom. So push on it and it should feel just like soft skin kinda, and spring back. Sprinkle a little flour on it, push it with your fingers, and when you get to that consistency, you're good. Now don't worry too much if you're too wet or too dry with this. It's gonna work just fine and the pizza's gonna be great. The more you do this, the more you'll realize what consistency you're after and really what you prefer. A lot of it has to do with how hot you're cooking it. If you're going to cook at 350 degrees, you're going to want it pretty dry. If you cook at 550 degrees, which is what I usually do, you're going to want it pretty wet because you're going to want that moisture to expand inside and help pop your dough when it cooks. If you're cooking real hot, and I'll show you this in one of the later videos, if you want to cook at 700, 750 degrees, you're going to want it very, very wet, or else it's just going to burn. You need that moisture to protect your dough. So today we're going to do the dough as if we're cooking at 550 degrees, and that just means until it starts to come away from the bowl. So you can see it coming away from the sides. It's still pretty wet, but we're going to beat this now for a total of about 7 minutes. We want it kneaded on this dough hook. That kneading action, that stretching, is what's going to create the elasticity. It's going to give you, stretch the gluten that's formed and give you that chewy crust that's so good on pizza like this. So this has been going a total of 7 minutes. I cut out the middle of it so you don't have to sit and watch the 20-minute set and the 7-minute knead. And you can see when I dump it out here what it's going to look like. So flour work surface, I use a little screen mesh with my flour and sift it out onto my, just right onto the counter. And you'll see when it comes out here, it's still a little sticky. You really can't see it great from this angle, but it wants to cling to the bowl, and I've got to kind of scrape it out. And there you can see how it's still moving. It's not a real hard ball. It's going to need a lot of flour to work it. It's still very sticky, so cover it with flour again. And I'm going to knead it for just a minute here by hand. Just kind of bring it together the rest of the way and smooth it out. So a normal kneading action is you fold the dough over and you push it with the palms of your hand. So you fold it and push it, fold it and push it. And you'll get used to doing this. It's actually kind of fun once you get the hang of it. And this will continue to build the little stretchiness in the dough, stretching out that gluten, and this is going to form a ball that's easier to work with. And I'm slowing down here to show you kind of this motion I'm doing to form my ball, and what I'm doing is twisting it on the sides. I put my palms flat against it, and as I send one hand forward, the other back, twisting the dough, I slide my hands underneath it and pinch off the bottom. So I keep doing that. Twist on the sides, sliding my hands to the middle, and that forms a ball and pinches it at the bottom. So you can see when I flipped it over, the little pucker at the bottom where the dough is brought together, the rest of it's smooth. Now to cut it, you can use a knife. I use this board scraper. This is one of my favorite tools for making pizza. This particular recipe I'm going to cut into four balls. It's going to make 4 pizzas, and that's a good sized pizza. That's like a 12-inch flat, or if you want a little bit thicker crust, about a 10-inch. So it's a good sized pizza. This feeds, well, we're a family of 7, a lot of little kids, but it feeds 7 of us with leftovers just fine. So this is a lot of pizza. A lot of you will get 2 full meals out of this. Again, with the little dough balls, I'm going to roll it the exact same way, twisting underneath, sliding my hands, and pinching the bottom so that I get a nice round tight surface. Now you want this for a couple of reasons. One, this is going to rise and you want it to stretch against that skin you formed and stay in a ball. The other reason is if you don't form it round here, your dough, when you actually roll it out, isn't going to be round. You have to start with a round dough ball if you want a round pizza. Your pizza will take on the shape of whatever ball you have at this point. So get it nice and round and tight. Then I just spray some nonstick spray in a couple of Tupperwares and roll all my dough balls, pop them in, put the lid on it, and at this point you're going to have 2 options. You can either let it set. We're going to eat these in just a couple hours here, so I can let it set out on my countertop for the next 1 to 2 hours. Is probably about as far as you want to go, and it's going to rise. It'll double or more in there. It'll get huge and even pop the lid off sometimes. Or you can stick this right in the fridge, and this is good for up to a week in the fridge. Now, something you want to pay attention to with this, when I use yeast, this is actual baking yeast, it's going to rise a lot faster, and even in the fridge it's going to rise up bigger. So you want to keep an eye on it in case it pops the lid, that you push that back down. If it deflates a little in the fridge, that's okay. It'll do one more rise. If you do cool them in the fridge, make sure you pull them out at least 2 to 3 hours before you're going to cook them. Really 3 to 4 is ideal. Let them come completely to room temperature and rise again before you try and bake with these. But this particular recipe works best just for a fresh dough. I've got some other dough recipes you can check out on my site that I'll be recording for using a live yeast, and that's actually a cultured yeast that I keep in my fridge. That's one that takes a cold rise and takes a few days to rise. But as far as this goes, this is the end. So set those out on your counter and get ready to bake. You can look at the rest of my videos to see how to actually bake with this, or just give it a go. Thanks for watching.